this year. And we're really thrilled to have the two gentlemen that are here to speak to us this morning. I'm going to introduce Paul, and then Paul is going to introduce Daniel Hintz, who's the other speaker this morning. Many of you do know Paul because he was born and raised here in Ashtabula County. Paul is the managing director for Bonatus 3 and Newmark Grubb, Arkansas, a real estate investment and advisory firm. Paul studied at SMU in Dallas, Texas, and received a degree in finance, and then went on to get his MBA from the University of Arkansas. He's married to Rebecca and has 4 children and lives in the Cleveland area. Please join me in welcoming Paul Esterer.
Good morning. My voice is a little hoarse, so I apologize. But again, thank you for having me today, and I think I'm so glad to see a great crowd here. Thank you, Dean Stocker, and the leadership here of asking about this innovative topic today regarding the experience economy, regarding a new way of thinking, a new way of approaching how we live, how we operate, how we commute, all those things that go into what makes Ashtabula County special. I think Daniel Hintz and I are going to speak today about, and it's mainly Daniel, and thank goodness I brought Daniel because I would have been dead on speaking for this long, but I just want to go back to, I grew up 3 blocks from here. I spent my childhood at Straw Hat Theater with, our family was like the Von Trapp singers. I know my dad's here, and our house was the only thing about me and the Von Trapp singers is when they had auditions. I was 7 years old at the Art Center, and of course I sang what I thought was beautiful, whatever I did at the time. The only people that made it was my brother and my sister. Somehow they didn't have room for another Esterer, which was fine because I really was awful. So all the singing went to my mom and my dad. But when I think about my memories of Ashtabula County and the importance those things had in my life, whether it was down at Straw Hat Theater on the beach, whether it was Township Park and Connie on the 4th of July, what makes special Connie on Ashtabula, the county, Geneva, is different to every one of us, but there's some unique things that we're going to talk about called the Theater of Cool. The Theater of Cool is what's been evolving over the last 20 years all across the country. And we're trying to figure out, how do we grow our communities? How do we reinvigorate our communities? How do we do these things that we all want jobs? We all want to keep our economy going strong, but I think we're all kind of lost a little bit. And I want to say that every day, Daniel and I are constantly evolving our theories based on stuff we've done. I'm a series of 50 mistakes. I've never been afraid of trying something, failing. There's down days and there's good days, but I've done every kind of real estate product we could, and then there's some that have failed. I've consulted and run campaigns and worked for the largest companies in the world to the smallest and poorest counties in the country, trying to solve this equation. And I'm never afraid of kind of pushing forward. And so I hope the thought today is to say, whatever's happened the last hundreds of years here, open our minds to the cool cast of characters that are here within the community. And I want you to listen a little bit to some real experiences we've had about how to activate our economic development model here in the county. How do we look at things in a different way? And I think Daniel Hintz today, who he and I have worked directly together. We're a partner with each other. We spoke together, and we continually have found shocking. Because when we hired him, I was on the board of downtown Denton in Arkansas, Walmart's headquarters, largest company in the world, all the capital resources you could ever imagine. And then when Walmart was like, we can't hire anyone, no one wants to move to Arkansas. It's the same reason why growing up in Ohio, Alaska and Arkansas are the last 2 places you think you're going to end up. Well, when you marry a Southern belle with a sweet accent, next thing you know, I'm living in Arkansas, and that's my new paradise. But I've lived there 18 years from both banking and real estate background. But I truly was amazed when the biggest company in the world couldn't hire people. I hear that problem here, I hear it in other counties. And they said, okay, we can offer more money. Didn't work. That spouse was like, honey, you're not moving me to Arkansas. It's just the end of the road. So they said, okay, we're going to reinvigorate the schools. We now have the best school system in the state of Arkansas, one of the top in the country now in Bentonville. That helped a little. And then, so we were sitting there in a dead downtown. Know that this town has no sense of place. I mean, it's just an old farming town where they had apples coming in and they had a fairgrounds and that was it. You know, population 10,000. We hired Daniel Hintz and he came in. The resume was film degree, which perfectly translates. Worked at a children's theater production company, which is great. Great cooking background, maybe had some culinary experience. He did everything but traditional economic development. And, but we're at this point where like, you know, the good thing is it was at such a low, like there was no hope for that. Like, we got to try something different because the economic development folks who came in, the previous banker, we had just, it wasn't working. And what happened was some real experiences about how you take a zero budget and everyone working against you sometimes or no one paying attention to then creating this cool theme because everybody thinks it's money, but it's not about the money. It's not about it's going to cost a lot of money to save your town or your county. So I really want Daniel to get into his presentation. I'll kind of riff back and forth with him as needed. He'll point at me and I'll have to say something. At the end, we'll leave it for questions. But Daniel Hintz, he's taught at Notre Dame. He has traveled and continues to be a big foodie in the food movement. He's constantly innovating ideas. When I go spend time with he and his wife in Arkansas, she lets me sing. You know, I've always wanted to be Tony in West Side Story. I've been rejected in every theater, but someday I'm going to be Tony in West Side Story. Sorry, guys. Maria, thank you, my pleasure. Regardless, Daniel Hintz is going to speak to us on the Theater of Cool. And again, appreciate Daniel spending time today, and I think you'll find his talk energizing. Thank you, Daniel.
All right, well, that's the nice thing about having theater training, is I get to project to the back of the room. So if you guys have a hard time hearing me, just throw an egg at me or something. But I also appreciate being here. This is my second trip to Ashtabula County. I met several of you last time. And I was mentioning earlier at the table that I was introduced to some ideas and to some projects and some things last time I was here. I come back and find out that they're actually launched, to find out that they're actually moving forward. And doing this work in multiple communities around the country, I will tell you that that is far rarer than you think it is. That you walk into a community, you start hearing people talk about ideas, talk about things that they want to get done, and then you come back and find out that it's actually happened. So congratulations. And I think the other thing, which is also really important to note in this work, is it's a grind, it's an experiment. You got to constantly be playing. And the very fact that you're moving forward with things, specifically after the economic challenges that we faced over the past 10 years, is a profound success. And having worked as executive director of two nonprofits that focused on downtown development for the past 9 years, being in the trenches and just grinding it out every day, sometimes it's really hard to see that. We were talking about those things, and you're in the moment, it's hard to recognize that. Well, I will tell you, coming back the second time, recognizing the fact that these projects are off the ground, and these are not small projects, I just want to say congratulations because I appreciate the effort. I've been there. I've been on that side of things, and that's a pretty cool thing. So, just really quick, I started Velocity Group in November of last year after being in the world for about 9 years, grinding it through and learning and experimenting and playing, as Paul mentioned. And so, really, I love stories, right? Stories is how we share who we are as a people, share our sort of morals and our values. It's how we pass things down from one generation to the next, stories are incredibly powerful. If there's a story, for example, that is about your community, and it is not a positive thing, it can kill economic development. Whether you have the best stuff in there or not, a bad story, because a great story can lift it up in a way that $1 million can't. Stories are incredibly powerful. And so I'm going to start this presentation with a story. That's me, right? That's right. I feel that still sometimes too, which is funny. I'm about 11 years old, right? And I'm going to share this story. That was interesting. I'm going to share this story to kind of talk about the genesis of some of the concepts that I'm going to explain later on. But I was about 10, 11 years old. I grew up in the sort of inner city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So this is coming back up to the upper Midwest as I jump it back into a warm bath. I get it, right? So Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I had to clean the second floor bathroom every Saturday. And for a 10, 11-year-old, you're like, dude, that is the worst job ever. I'm sure there's other bad ones out there, but for a 10, 11-year-old, that was terrible. And so I kept trying to think of ways to kind of juice it up, to make it a little bit more fun. And so I came up with the idea of turning the second floor bathroom, after I had cleaned it, into a restaurant. All right, that's my foodie thing goes all the way back to the day, right? So after I cleaned it, and it was impeccable. Okay, it shined. It was amazing. I created menus. I had my family come in. They ordered sandwiches. There's a couple things that I learned through that process that sort of still stick with me today. That context is king. I could have made the best sandwiches in the world, but I was serving them in a bathroom. All right, that makes a difference, right? And that has relevance to the work we do today. The second thing is marketing and messaging, the story. I named my restaurant the Crap House. Now, it made sense for a 10, 11-year-old, right? Probably not the best thing to do when you're opening up a restaurant. Like I said, 2 lessons learned that stuck with me. If I ever open up a restaurant, I know what not to call it. Absolutely. But what we talk about and what's seeded in me and the subsequent work that I've done over 25 years of my career, whether it's in theater, whether it's in film, whether it's in restaurants, whether it is doing downtown work in downtown Seattle to smaller communities like Bentonville, all of this stuff was about place. I kept hearing about how do we create places in our theater or in our restaurants or even in our downtowns. Place, but how do you define place? It is a moving target. People talk about it, placemaking, this, but what is the definition? Oh, you'll know it when you see it. That's a definition for a couple of other things that I don't necessarily want to talk about right now. But the point is that it doesn't make any sense from an economic development paradigm. How do you create strategies around this sort of thing that's just out there? And so one of the things that I've really been trying to work on for the past several years is defining that DNA of place. What makes up that sense of place? And how do you incorporate the past, the present, and the future? Because that's really what place is all about. It's not just about future things. It's about where you came from, where you are right now, and where you're going. All right, that alignment of time. And so really the DNA of place is the basic genetic instructions, right? The core of the idea. First one is safety, right? From a sense of general ease to the freedom to be who you are, to explore place and self with abandon. That sense of safety is necessary for people to feel at home. Next is selection. Encouraging or cultivating a wide range of options. So no matter where you are and how you wake up that morning, what you want, where you want to go, that you have multiple places and multiple things to do. Next one is service. This is about relationship building. A sense of place. People need to feel connected to that place. Whether you're an employee or an employer, whether you're a tourist, you need to have that neighborliness. And that is an economic development paradigm. It is not soft. It is not out there that if people don't feel connected to the community they're in, they won't stick around. Businesses won't stick around. You can't cultivate customers without that one-on-one attention. And the last one, which I love, is that concept of surprise. All right, surprise, constantly fostering the positive difference between expectations and reality. People walk into a community, and you want to talk about Arkansas, and Paul mentioned some of this, that in 2008, when I started with downtown Bentonville, people were surprised at sort of, it was that day. Right? It wasn't a very positive thing, and it really wasn't used necessarily as an asset. What we've been able to do is cultivate an element of surprise when people walk in and they're like, you have these type of restaurants here? You have one of the America's greatest cultural institutions in Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art that opened up on 11/11/11. We've changed a narrative where it was no longer just the headquarters of Walmart. You come in, very utilitarian, you get in the airport, you go do your business, you get back on the plane, you leave. Right? Now people are coming in and they're spending an extra day or two, even to come in to do business, because they're surprised and delighted, and I'll use that word again, delighted to stick around because there's stuff to do. Now, surprisingly enough, they're not just conducting business, but they're also opening up their wallet and spending even more money. So you're creating an entire economy around surprise. And that is something that I think is often overlooked, but is vitally important to any economic development conversation. So this is sort of the four elements of the DNA of place. That if a place has all four of these things, they got it going on. But it is not easy. And it is a constant and consistent investment in making sure that you have these four things. So I'm going to talk really quickly, kind of geek out for just a minute on economics, because I think this is really, really important. Is that back in the day, when we used to talk about the great American economy, we used to have basically three ranges of products, especially from a manufacturing standpoint and what the American public was purchasing. We had the cheap product. Remember the stuff, the horrible reputation, the stuff coming from Korea and Japan. It was cheap, it was ubiquitous, they just throw it on the table. And if you bought that stuff, you really didn't tell friends and family that that lamp was from these places. But you could buy it because it was really, really cheap. Then you had the premium product, the stuff that when you bought meant something. Cadillac, those are them. When you were driving around, you were doing that actually meant something. It was a premium product. It had a brand, it had a lifestyle to it. But most of the American public were purchasing, that heart of the mass market was average product, it was good product, well made, at good prices. And so most of the American public was buying and living within that world. But we have had a massive shift in our economy over the past 30 years. And I know, as a Gen Xer, I'm feeling it, because when I tried to start with my new family and my savings, the economy, so I got to start all over again. I'm feeling it, this shift. So this is a personal thing with me. But now what we're talking about is a whole new economic model for what's going on in the economy. Is that you're either commodity driven, i.e., it is about mass. And this is the Walmart model. The reason why they're able to have things so cheap is they buy in such bulk. The only way to compete in commodity is to do that exact same thing. If you think you can compete in a commodity-driven world and only have 2 stores or 3 stores, you will fail. So as a restaurateur, if you're going to compete in that world, it's inexpensive, it's mass market, low value, low customer loyalty, and the only differentiation is price. You better be ready to rock out 250 restaurants everywhere in the country if you're going to compete in that world. That's the only way to do it. Otherwise, you will lose. On the other side of that model is story-driven. Human power, customized, premium value, high customer loyalty, and the differentiation is experience. It's about human connections. That's where small businesses thrive. That's where small communities thrive. It is story-driven. You're reaching out to the heart of people. You're customizing those experiences and making yourself relevant on a human scale. All right? And this is where most communities sit. But most communities don't realize that that's where they need to compete. Because the situation is, if you find yourself in the mediocre middle, overpriced, no customer loyalty, no differentiation, there's a great book out there called Blue Ocean Strategy. If you don't know about it, pick it up. It's a great book. Because the costs of doing business in the mediocre middle right now, just to get attention, you have to spend more money to differentiate yourself from everybody else out there. That you're putting all your resources just to get your story told. It's not an R&D. It's not an innovation. It's just letting people know who you are. And really your margins on that are this big. Because now you're competing simply with saying, my competitor is charging $1.50, I'm going to charge $1.35. How is that a good business paradigm of making less than your competitor? It doesn't make any sense. The only way to make that back is to jump into commodity. So this is a really important note that where I come from in my paradigm is in the story-driven piece. There are experts out there that deal with commodity, right? That's not my world. This is the world in which I live and I work, and it's important to make that differentiation because now we're going to start talking about sort of the ROI on story. How do we start to activate that story, and how does that turn into real economic return? So the ROI on story, that story-driven economy, you have higher margins, it's about buzz, you have happier customers, and a desire to repeat. That's just good business. To me, that's simply good business. That's the business 101 right there. More money, stronger customer base, and sustainable success. How are you guys telling your story? That's the big question that I ask every community, every business I work with, every restaurant I work with. Doesn't make a difference if you're a multi-billion-dollar company or you're a small bookstore on the corner of a struggling downtown. The question is, how are you telling your story? So now we start talking about setting the stage, right? What are the pieces of this story? How do you tell a story? And storytelling is a part of our DNA as humans. We've been doing it since the very time when we could put paintings on the side of a cave. So this is what is also so fascinating is why have we gotten away from understanding the power of story and how we set the stage? So one of the big, most powerful things about storytelling is that it aligns. And alignment creates efficiencies. Once again, a basic business paradigm. Inefficiencies cost you money. Inefficiencies slow you down. Inefficiencies does not allow you to take product to the market, and therefore you lose market value. So alignment is key. So this is one of the reasons. Whoops! Where does it go? Where's that little button thingy? There it is. Okay. So it's technology. All right. So the story. Story drives everything. You understand who you are, and that drives how you do it and what you do. Okay, if you speak to that place of expertise, it's really hard to not do well. See, I'm also speak with my hands, so this is very dangerous. So from there, you go, okay, so what is our economic growth plan as it's based on our story, on who we are? Now you look at Esterer and you say, all right, so we have wineries, we have manufacturing, we have all these things. Why would all of a sudden you turn around and say, we're going to be the tapioca capital of the world? What? Do you realize the infrastructure it would need to take to shift this entire economy to tapioca? I like tapioca too, which is pretty cool. But the point is that you have to go from who you are and where you are and the infrastructure you have, that asset-based thinking, to drive those economic and growth plans. But understand that those bigger plans are not done. You're not done. Because it doesn't answer to all the needs of your entire community. So then you start going into the area master plans. So for example, you have a county plan, and you're figuring out where you're going and what you're doing. And then you begin to look at the individual communities. And what is their individual stories? And how do you create individual plans? But if it's guided by a larger plan, the beautiful thing is it becomes part of the aggregate story. You're starting to generate what Jim Collins in Good to Great calls the flywheel, right? It just starts to move because now you have this kinetic energy, this momentum behind that larger plan. You're not sitting here in that Sisyphean boulder, kind of rolling that thing up the hill. That's what it looks like when it's top down, right? When there's only a couple people in a big plan pushing it up without a lot of other people behind you. And that's hard and incredibly expensive. So this is why that area of master plan helps to develop that energy behind the plan. Now from there, understand that each community has different neighborhoods, has different business clusters. That's what I like to call experience districts. And it's within the experience district, at that sort of base level, that block, street, and building level, on how you design, because communities tell their stories and their priorities and their values by how they design. If you say you're a pedestrian-friendly community, but have no crosswalks, how is that telling the story? If you say that you want to be able to have a great culinary scene, but you have no restaurants, right, and don't allow them through code, or don't allow certain things to happen, that's the way that communities tell their story through design. So you look at that experience district, and you look at that sort of block, street, and building, and what I like to call the stage and the set of the theater of cool. And we'll get to the theater of cool in a minute. And then from there, we begin to look at the props, the businesses, the events, public art. How are you continuing to activate this space? And understand all of this is aligned with your economic growth plan. So all of this is economic development. It's the software to the hardware. A computer is useless without software. It's the same thing with communities. You can build the best building in the world, but if you don't activate it, it's a building. What's the value of that? You have to activate it. And this is where the theater of cool comes into play. Because the bottom line and the heart of all of this is people. This has to be human-driven, which is another reason why commodities, which is fascinating, and I'll get to this in a minute as well, is nobody is just a 45-year-old white woman. Nobody. Now, you may be 45, you may be white, you may be a woman, but I will tell you, married to a 45-year-old woman, she's not the same person every single time. You got to understand that. Nobody is a 28-year-old Latina who lives in this neighborhood. Just those, that's a commodification of humanity, right? In the world that we live in, we got to know and connect with who you are as a human being, not from a generalization. That's why that is so important. That is about humans and where we are and where we stand. That's the powerful nature of this approach. It is not about generalizations and stereotypes. It's about the collective stories that we all tell, feeding into where we live and that collective story, feeding into the collective story of the entire region. You get that aligned and moving, and there is nothing that can stop you. Nothing. So I'll give you a prime example of how we did this in Bentonville. And they did a city plan, city development plan, which also connected to the Northwest Arkansas Council, which is sort of like a regional, it's a four-county plan. And they came up with 55 points of light, right? This is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it. It had both the hardware and the software. So then the city said, well, how does our city play a role in that bigger plan, but at the same time tell our unique story? So they set up that plan. But then we said, well, wait a minute, but downtown is different. So first they described a geographic location. So right there you've got downtown master plan, 1,765 acres. That was my geographic scope for 6 years. It was the complete economic development of 1,765 acres. It had the world's largest retailer. It had a giant museum. Right in the middle was the square. We had almost 7,000 people living in that district. Half of them were at or below poverty level. We had almost no multifamily housing developed for almost 20 years. We had one restaurant, one, and it was the Greasy Spoon. And I love my Cecil Turner, but the dude was a trip, right? He just did his restaurant, and that's what he did. Now, what was really interesting is that the city committed to the redevelopment of this. But then the taxpayers passed a $113 million bond issuance, stopped going pay-as-you-go, and actually said we need to catch up, it passed by over 67%. So the taxpayers committed to it. There's going to be a $55 million project right here on 8th Street. They put another $2.5 million into their square. They're redoing this street right here, this street right here. They redid this street, they redid this street. All capital improvements, exactly where the municipality needed to sit. Their job is infrastructure. That's where municipalities need to sit. It's not about incentives, it's not about any of that kind of stuff. You get the infrastructure right, and the free market then can activate and take over. Okay, so now what you're looking at is the city focused its limited resources and said, we're going to prioritize downtown for the next 5 to 7 years with our investments. And that's what they did. So then, as the master plan that was passed in 2006 was being checked off, and once again, a plan, if it just sits on a shelf, is useless. You have to keep crunching at it. You got to keep pushing through. So we got about 75% through, and then we started another area of about 295 acres, the southeast downtown master plan. We realized that that area wasn't working as well as the rest of the downtown area, so we said we needed to focus on that. So then we started deep diving into a specific 295 acres within the master plan. And then from there, we broke it down in even further districts and created special plans within that. Now understand, the alignment started with the regional plan. We're still looking to the regional plan for some of our conversational pieces. But now we're bringing it to the streets. We're bringing it to that block, street, and building perspective. This is all residential here. We had 130,000, right here, 135,000 square feet of empty, old industrial space. I don't know about you, but we didn't have a lot of people just driving around going, I want to buy a 78,000 square foot empty old Tyson plant. Yeah, it's not a usual thing that people are like, top market there. So we need to repurpose all of that stuff. We need to give it a story. Right? Well, here's the thing. Tyson plant, sold. Kraft plant, how many square feet? 60,000. 60,000 square feet, sold. Ice house, 30,000 square feet, sold. Because we named it, we gave it a purpose, we gave it a story. No market value. As soon as we created the market district, connected it to a larger plan, was connected it there, it sold within 2 years. 130,000 square feet of old, nasty, and I'm telling you, you'd take 2 showers and you still couldn't get the smell of old chicken off your skin. All right, it was gross. So then we got down to the block, street, and building place. Now, it doesn't mean that this stuff is going to happen. I'll tell you right now, the guy that owns this property that says there's going to be a public square was like, what? You're not going to, how does that work? It's the idea of stimulating ideas to start changing the narrative of this part of downtown. And then once again, we start looking at our props, right? The buildings, putting random green penguins around, but public art, stimulate ideas on how we start changing the narrative of that part of town, which quite frankly was dead. There was nothing going on. We did the same thing with the market district. Kind of gave it a purpose and a place. If it's Kraft and Tyson, why wouldn't we continue to look at how do we stimulate young food entrepreneurs? How do we turn these factories into creating food product that you could stamp Bentonville, Arkansas on it? I mean, Walmart headquarters is right down the street. Some of the best in the world when it comes to distribution and retail development. Why don't we look at those expertise to help out our young entrepreneurs with a distribution conversation? So now we started having conversations about a factory for not product, but for ideas. And how do we start stimulating that and using those empty spaces that you see within the market district to stimulate a whole new level of economy, but still connected to who and what we were as a community. We designed residential and said this is how we want to see density in downtown. We looked at our transects pieces, which is the idea of how you build complete streets as it relates to your housing. Block, street, building, and then looking at our props. But all within the story of what we were trying to sell and tell about downtown. So now we talk about bringing the story to life, because once again, this is still all about the built environment. Right? How do you activate it? How do you bring that people element into it? I thought this is a really cool quote Andy Goldsworth is a British sculptor and photographer. His stuff is absolutely amazing. And he produces site-specific sculpture and land art, which in and of itself, once again, is interesting, but it's how he uses it with context, how he activates space that I love. This quote, the difference between the theater with and without an audience is enormous. There is a palpable critical energy created by the presence of an audience. An audience is people. You don't have people, you have no energy. And without energy, you can't attract new businesses. You can't attract much of anything because people walk in and go, nah. You're competing with communities with energy. It's not about businesses and incentives. It's about communities with energy. Businesses can go anywhere they want now. Heck, half the people that work there probably don't even go to an office anymore. People want to live where stuff is going on, where there's energy and excitement. And that is your competitive advantage. So how do you do this? And this is where we start getting the concept of the theater of cool. Right? How are we doing on time? Soon? Okay, I'll whip through this real quick. Theater of cool. Thank you very much. No, So this is really understanding how you develop and tell the story. Ensures that a unique personality, spirit, and character shines no matter the external pressures. See, alignment begins to get rid of the internal pressures that often kills momentum. Right? Internal pressures are just as dangerous as external pressures. But internal pressures are things you can do about. You have control over your internal pressure. External pressure is the stuff that's going to happen. You know, it's the chaos theory. A butterfly flies in China and it starts raining somewhere in America, right? It's basic chaos theory. That stuff, there's nothing you can do about it, but it exists. You know, the global economy tanks, that's not your fault, but it will affect you. This is why the theater of cool is simply not about million-dollar projects. But you can play this out for $500, and if you do it enough and consistently and keep telling your story, that's how you grind through one of the worst economic situations we've had since the Great Depression. That's how you grind through this stuff. It aligns. Alignment. Very important. Connect who you are with what you do and how you do it. Efficiency. It cultivates. It fosters and celebrates. Another really important word, celebrates the productive and profitable collisions between people and places. You create places where people can randomly run into each other, where the idea of the coffee shop is your entire community, where people love to just hang out and chill with you. That's a world of the entrepreneur. Grows. These are all really good economic development words right here. Develop and strengthen authentic, long-lasting relationships with customers. It's about customers. It's customers that give you value. You don't give yourself your own value. Customers are the things that give you value. Your brand, no matter how much money you put into a brand, you're not the one that defines its value. It's everybody else around you. So growing those authentic relationships are vital to long-term economic sustainability, and then activates. And this is that piece that energizes that sense of place and brings to life those public and private spaces. So I'll go into this really quickly, and I got to give some props to two gentlemen that, one of them actually lives here in Cleveland, Joe Pine and Jim Gilmore, the Experience Economy. I got a certification from those guys about 6-7 years ago, and it really gave me some aligning principles on a lot of stuff I'm doing. If you haven't read the book or had an opportunity to bring Jim in to speak to you guys, it's an amazing opportunity resource that you have right over there in Cleveland. But there are 4 realms that I'm going to introduce really quickly, that when you're talking about the theater of cool, when you're talking about activization, you need to ask yourself, what information do you want people to actively absorb? This is very an active way of learning. It's not simply reading, but absorb, to take back with them. How do you invite trust, create choice, and open opportunity for full participation and action? How do you let people immerse themselves in everything that's going on? How can you get people to spend time? Because when people spend time with you, understand that that is really important. That means that they care. That means that they want to spend time with you. When they do that, that's your hook. Right? Because time is of value. And if people are spending time with you, they value that moment. Letting them just sort of be and hang out. And then you have delight, which once again I love, because in the kernel of delight is surprise. And how do you delight and entertain? In those communities, and those events, and those businesses, once again, this is a through line, a paradigm, if you will, of how to do business. It's this piece right here. It is not about this, or this separately. It is how do you bring all of these things together, whether it's on your streets, whether it's on your sidewalks, whether it's on your websites, whether it's in your businesses. How do you do all this? Average time on a website, 20 seconds. On a web page, 20 seconds. If you can get someone to do 40 seconds on a web page, that is the new presentness, guys. 40 seconds. You get someone to spend 40 seconds on a web page, you got them hooked. Because then you can translate that into an hour into your downtown, which then translates into 4 or 5. And guess what happens next? I want to live there. I want to vacation there. I want to find a job there. This is how you value up. It's that upsell, right? The upsell. Those in sales are constantly in the upsell. This is how you upsell. So there's a lot of pieces that go into this, that sort of this experience economy, sort of the theater of cool 101, which I don't know if we have all the time, very short time to do it. But here are just really quick things. Theming. You have the overt theme, right? Which is German Fest, Oktoberfest. Or there's a company out there that actually looks to magazines as their designing paradigm. It's a hotel thing, and they do Rolling Stone, they'll look at Fast Company, and they'll actually design to the magazine. So what is the vibe of a Fast Company? Not just the font and the physicalness, but what's the vibe? What's the language? What's the talk? And it's an inside thing. It's not a marketing ploy. It's not a campaign. It is simply an aligning structure that they're able to look at and say, you know what? We dig the vibe here, so our business paradigm is going to be sort of based on the feeling and the vibe of that. Then you look at harmonizing. Can someone tell me what this is? Wine glasses, wine tasting bar. What it isn't a butcher store. Okay? They don't sell Tupperware. All right? It is very clean and simple. But yet the powerfulness of aligning the visual cues is oftentimes the first thing people see. And then this place, Intelligentsia Coffee. All right? Great coffee. They call themselves a coffee lab. When you walk in, they are labbing coffee. Man, they got beakers and things, and I want a cup of coffee, and some guy's pouring it halfway across the room, and it drips into a thing, and they are a coffee lab. They live it, they breathe it. That is their story. They harmonize that. But I will tell you, how does the visual landscape connect to your theme and overall story? The next question is, okay, this is creepy cat lady right here. I don't even know what that is in a retail store. What story are you telling? How are you organizing this? Or even this, McDonald's. Okay, McDonald's is very bright lights, hard seats. What does that tell you? Get your stuff and get out of here. It has nothing to say anything about the food or anything else. It's just when you walk in the door, you're not just hanging out. Versus a Starbucks, which welcomes you, the warm colors, the seats, the fire, all those different kind of things. Which is really important. Memorabilia. This is where you make your money, guys. How do you merchandise your story and expand your offerings? This is economic development. You walk in, you love ties or bow ties. I'm not a bow tie guy, mainly because I don't know how to tie them and they look weird. But bow ties is a subculture. I mean, these people are hardcore. It's like dudes that grow those really big beards. There's like a creepy subculture. They have their own websites. It's a whole thing. The question is, if you're going to walk in and buy a $50 bow tie, but then you don't find something you want, understand that they're advocates for bow ties. So instead of buying a $50 tie, they may buy 4 of these shirts because they want to get them to their friends, because they want to advocate and say bow ties are cool. Okay? Or a restaurant that's doing pickles or anything else. You've had great pickles. They make their own pickles. Why wouldn't you put them in a jar and put the name of the restaurant here? Guess what? People give them away as gifts. They hang out there. All right, you're already making it. What does it take? But it's not about going into a retail store. It's simply allowing people to take something away with them and then engage all the senses. Sense memory is one of the most powerful memories we have. You're in Italy. The trip to Italy, people go, what do you remember? Oh man, I was on this corner of this one little place and I had this little cup of espresso and I heard the bells ringing and the smell of the city. You know, that's how they tell those stories. It's about the senses. All right? They didn't say my cup of coffee was 32 lira. That's not how they tell the story. But look to those economic development stories. How are you telling the economic? Well, price per square foot is $3.27. Okay, that's great. That's supporting information. But how you sell your region is the stories, and that's sensory. Engaging the five senses. Here's the bottom line right here, is that people think that mass amounts of customers make the market. That's commodity driven. Each customer is multiple markets. That's story driven. It's a lot cheaper to engage 3 customers and you sell the heck out of them than it is to try to stand out above all those customers with this one market. That's the bottom line with the theater of cool here. So we're going to go really quickly, and then I'm done. With the story swell, it's how you tell good storytelling. You have an authentic story, you get it into action, you have some social value, and then you keep it up. It is not one time and then you're done. It is constant. Constant storytelling. There you go. This is how you tell a story. This is exactly how you tell a story in real life. You look at, every story begins here. So you look at your social media campaign, you base it like this. You look at a marketing campaign, you base it off of this. This is in our DNA, guys. We've been doing this for millennia. All right, this is not a new concept. We do this in front of grandkids, in front of our children. We tell stories. I heard you guys telling stories all around the table today. You know, this is what we do. Let's go back to what we do as human beings. That's the point of this. This is not new stuff. Economic impact. We took this to the Bentonville Farmers Market. 2008, 91,000 in sales. 2013, 615,000 in sales. Earned revenue for the Downtown Association went from $103,000 to $581,000. That's a nonprofit. Earned revenue in the door. Not gifts, donations, grants. Earned revenue. Tax receipts from the A&P Commission. 2008, 18,982. 2013, $132,206. We look at downtown residential. That was going for about $55 to $60 a square foot. Now we're getting stuff that's not per spec, so it's built to suit, so it's not hitting the market, but now we're getting $132 a square foot. Downtown retail, we're at a 3% vacancy. We don't have any more space. So now we have to build new buildings. Downtown office, the base was $8. The base now is $14. And the top flew up about $6. Yeah, about $6 a square foot. So it went from about 18, now it's up to about 25. That's in 5 years. So I think the point is this has real economic impact. And the piece that I wanted to kind of talk about, and he touched on this, Paul touched on this, is the ensemble. It takes a village to raise a village, guys. It takes a lot of people doing a lot of things, and that's why alignment is so key. And this is how I run my company. I've got a cloud company. I've got people from all over the country that I work with that I can bring in at any given time, dependent upon the client base and the needs of the client. And it's the same situation with any economic development effort. You've got a couple key people and key organizations that just crank it out, but then you're constantly bringing people in and out. And it's that alignment and moving and shaking. And that's how this stuff works. And it is not a one-off or 2 times. It is a consistent. It is a daily effort. So there you go. I appreciate your time, and thanks for putting up with me. So thank you very much.